Today, we are running our very first remote show with a man named Andrew, who well, something very interesting, and I'll let you kind of take it away, Andrew.
Thanks for having me. Yes, well, I'm originally from California, Sacramento area, but currently I live in eastern Turkey, right near the Iranian border. And actually, right now I'm in a friend's hotel in Switzerland, but most of the year I'm in Turkey. And then I also travel a lot through the Middle East doing research, YouTube videos, guiding tours. But I'm here because you asked to talk about Noah's Ark and our research on this site that some believe is the buried remains of Noah's Ark.
Yeah. Did you? So I read that there was obviously the mountains that we're talking about are it's Mount Ararat in Turkey. And it does look like, I mean, it looks like there's a boat in there. It looks like there's something at least boat shaped down there. And so you did some LiDAR scans of the mountain?
Well, so yeah, the site was discovered in 1959, and then an American researcher named Ron Wyatt did a lot of research in the 80s, and I heard about it through him. And I was a kid living in Sacramento, going to school there. It was in middle school when I first heard about this site. And then I first visited the site while I was going to American River College there in Sacramento. I went
Oh yeah.
to this site in 1997, and I was middle of college that year. And I went out here with a friend, and I just wanted to do more research and understand it. And so it was fast forward to 2019. And that was the year we did LiDAR, we did GPR, which stands for ground penetrating radar, and so we're using all these non-destructive techniques to study the site.
And so what did you guys find in there when you looked through the scans?
Well, when they first discovered the site in 59, the big thing that stood out was that it's actually a boat shape. And so here from these old black and white photographs, high altitude NATO aircraft was photographing eastern Turkey. And so this was the year in 1959 that Turkey joined NATO. And so they were mapping this area that bordered not only Iran, but mainly the Soviet Union at the time, which now is the Armenian border there. And so as they were mapping these areas out, one of their cartographers, Captain Durupinar, who was a Turkish cartographer in the military, he discovered the site on 9/11, 1959. And he's like, wow, it looks like a boat. He's looking at these high altitude photographs in black and white. He's making these maps of the different roads and villages. And he sees this on the mountainside. Now, the site is about 17 miles or so south of the big volcano, Mount Ararat. And then, of course, in the Bible, it
Hmm.
doesn't say Noah's Ark landed on the Mount Ararat. It says the mountains of Ararat.
Right.
And so, if you look at that, the text or the word for Ararat, it actually comes from an ancient term for this kingdom that was in this area during the Iron Age called Urartu. And this is what the Assyrians, who lived in northern current day Iraq and had the capital city of Nineveh, they called the people that lived up here the Artians, and this kingdom of Urartu, the capital was this a couple hours south of where this boat is found today. And so the Bible said only that the ark landed in the mountains of this kingdom. So it would be like me today saying Noah's Ark landed in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It's not an exact peak; it's a general area,
Hmm.
and that's where they found this boat shape. And so that got a lot of people interested because this boat shape was found in the mountains of Ararat. And so fast forward to 1960. The summer of 1960, about a year later, an American Turkish expedition came out there, documented the site, even used dynamite to try to see what was under the ground, and they came away disappointed. They were looking for this perfectly preserved boat, not
Yeah.
understanding archaeology. And if you have a wooden ship that's in the mountains for thousands of years, is what you have left will be underground or in the soil, the chemical imprint. Maybe the shape will
Hmm.
still show up. And so, anyways, the site was kind of forgotten about. And then about 20 years after that, 1977, Ron Wyatt got involved. He was this American from Tennessee, and he started studying it through the late 70s until he passed away in 1999. And so when I went out there in '97, the Turks had already recognized the site as they believed as Noah's Ark. They put a visitor center
Hmm.
there. That was in 1987. They did that. So 10 years after that, I'm showing up as a college student and just interested in it as a tourist, taking pictures,
Hmm.
and then I got to know the locals. And so when I wanted to get involved more on the research side, I brought out a team with the help of many people back in 2019. That was the step to October of 2019, about 6 months before the pandemic started. And we did all this work and just timed perfectly because we had the Science Channel out there. And so, what did we find? So on that trip, we did LiDAR, which uses laser to,
Hmm.
they use it down in Central America to look through the dense foliage and, the dense jungle. Now, we don't have that issue at this site. It's all grass, it's all exposed. There's some trees here and there. But what LiDAR will do, it'll let you capture in a high resolution the terrain, so you can make an exact 3D model of the site. And so we collected over 500,000,000 laser points, with this LiDAR, terrestrial LiDAR. We had brought out from an Oregon company that we had hired, brought out a team. And so then not only did they recreate the site for preservation purposes and for later research, but they also brought out a GPR team. Now, GPR uses electromagnetic frequencies to study what's below the soil. So the signal the waves will go down into the ground. It will bounce off at different times depending on the density of the object, like the soil type or the rock or a buried wall, or petrified wood. So it'll come back to to the antenna, the receiver, um, at different times, and then the computer system can basically create an image of what you're looking at. And now with everything being digital, you can make a 360 image, and that's what we were able to do. We were able to go down as much as 13 meters, about 40 feet. With
Mm.
the we use two antennas to scan the site, two different frequencies that allows you at different depths. And the first thing that you're mainly collecting it in the field, yeah, but you do have a little screen that you can see kind of live what's below the ground without filtering the data. And right away, they found parallel lines about 9 feet down, and perpendicular lines, and that was exciting for the crew and the Science Channel that was filming this. They got very excited. It was a London-based team, and so they got everyone interviewed. It was very exciting. Um, 6 months after that, the archaeologist in America who we had hired to study the results, he did a little report, and he basically stated that, hey, in this one area, you can see right angles, a series of right angles about 7 meters down or 21 feet. And that, he said, is usually not natural. And so he said, as an archaeologist, he would excavate right there. So, in this boat shape, we're getting these different types of, angular structures and parallel lines and layers. So that was all cool. Well, I ran into a Turkish geologist who's been studying this site since the 1980s, and he's retired now. But I met him first in 2000, and then just kind of didn't stay in contact with him. And then in 2022, I ran into him again. And I said, "Hey, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we did this geophysical survey and did radar data. You didn't know about this, but do you know somebody who could analyze our data, a third party, like another person?" He said, "Oh, I know this lady in America. She's a geophysicist, has like 30 or 40 years experience. She could do it for free, probably." And so I was like, yes. And so she took our raw data, looked at it for, she was doing it on her off time. So maybe it took her 4 or 5 months to analyze everything. And then she sends me an email and says, and I'm in Turkey at this time. And she says, "Did you guys dug a tunnel down through this site?" And I'm like, "No, this is sitting on the side of a mountain here, it's 6,500 feet." And she said, "Well, I'm
Yeah.
seeing a tunnel down the middle of the boat and another broken up one going down the inside, the west hull, this boat shape." And she says this tunnel goes into a central hole, or you can say this corridor goes to a central cavity that's squarish in shape and goes all the way down until we lose data at 40 feet down below the soil, the surface. And so she said, "This is amazing. It's like, unless it's a earthquake crack, but she says the way the tunnel is situated with, she says you can still crawl through it. It's maybe 2 meters high in some places. So if you're short, you can stand up. So she, again, she found these not only these two tunnels going to a central cavity in the middle, but then she also saw at a deeper layer, a level below the surface, this whole, you can call it a hashtag or a pattern of, oh, maybe it's rooms, maybe it's beams supporting the ceiling. Until we drill down there and see what's going on. But what you're seeing is usually when you're not seeing nature. And so, critics who said, this is just a natural geological formation, you would
Mhm.
expect them the radar just to show, godly goop, of rocks and soil,
Yeah.
random noise. But here we're getting structure of angles and right angles and parallel lines and layers and now voids, open tunnels going down, following the pattern of this ship that you see above ground. So it's very exciting. That was 2023, and then just not last year, but 2024. We're in 2026 now. So
I know.
2024,
Weird.
we did a soil analysis, and so I do have slides showing all these things I'm talking about. I'm sorry, I'm rambling on, but I just want to briefly mention. And if we want to go back in detail, I can put up some of the images of this site, but and some of the things we did and saw below the ground. But the soil analysis showed, so let me backtrack. We had an Australian soil scientist come to Turkey in September 2024. Now, I have tours there's a lot of ancient sites in eastern Turkey. So I offer tours to see the site and go to other places. So him and his wife signed up for it. I didn't even know them. But when they got there, we had the Turkish geologist there too, the retired scientist, Dr. Salih Bayrak Tutan, and so it was great having two scientists on the trip. And I noticed when I was flying my drone over this site that the grass was yellow inside. This is just a mountainside. You have the ship shape in a valley, and then on the outside of the ship shape, it's just rough terrain with crevices and boulders and everything. But the grass around it was green, but the inside the ship shape it was yellow or yellower color, and everyone could see it even
Hmm.
from the ground. So I asked the scientists there, so, hey, why don't we design a survey to find out what's going on with the soil? Because obviously, the grass is growing differently because something's going on in the soil there, but it's very distinctive. And, so if this was just the same soil that you see across the whole mountainside and just, randomly creating up this oval shape, then you wouldn't expect that there'd be any difference in the chemical composition, but we're visually seeing that there is a difference. So we wanted to find out what's going on. So they designed a soil survey, and they took 88 random soil samples at 22 locations inside and outside of this boat. And then Dr. Salih Bayrak Tutan, who used to work at Ataturk University, about 5 hours away or 4 hours away, and he took these samples in December of 2024, had them analyzed by January of last year. In fact, I was here in Switzerland last year again, and he had WhatsApped me the images of the reports from the university lab, and it was amazing. I sent them on to Bill Crabtree from Australia, who's the soil scientist, and I even uploaded it to Grok and ChatGPT and Gemini. I was having all three analyze it and see what they could find the differences, between without mentioning anything, to say, okay, find what's different between these two groups of samples. And they all identified everything the same, that basically we're seeing 2.5 times more organic matter inside the boat. We're seeing 8 times lower pH level in the soil inside the boat. And we're seeing 38% more phosphorus inside the boat versus right outside. Again, these are random samples over 22 sites that we did. And so, again, if this was just a freak of nature sitting there, all the soil should be the same. But right away,
Right.
if you put the theory out that this is a decayed wooden boat sitting there for 4,000 years or more, depending on your chronology of the Bible, then you expect that a wooden boat, as it decayed, would leave a chemical imprint in the soil. And this is what we saw on
Mm.
this survey, that we're seeing, wow, especially the 2.5 times more organic matter. And there's a formula Bill told me that you could do on that, and they'll give you the percent of carbon. And when we ran that formula on that 2.5 times more organic matter and ran it for trying to get the average the carbon in the soil, it came out to be the exact same, basically the same amount of carbon where we saw in Ron Wyatt's 1977 soil sample. One of his samples he took in 1979. He took a sample and had it analyzed, and he had published that, over 40 plus years ago. And our recent, we did a random survey of 88 samples. He did a couple. I think he did five or six, one outside and four or five inside the boat. But even I should say our more complete survey, it basically matched even his one sample that he had published. So it was very interesting seeing this results. And again, we don't know what the results would be, even for GPR, the chemical analysis, all this stuff. We hire third party people who have nothing to do with Noah's Ark. They're not trying to push for anything, or they're not part of our team. They just did the work for us, and we're getting these type of results.
Wow. I mean, it's so fascinating because it's like anything could happen. I mean, obviously, so the tannins and the material inside the wood are what's making the soil on top of it so acidic, and the acidity is making it so that the grass isn't as green,
Possibly,
basically.
there's more work we want to do, but definitely just on the things we analyze: pH, organic matter, phosphorus. There were two other ones and those one was phosphate, and the other one was the salinity, and those two showed it was the same across inside and out. Someone might say, well, maybe the locals farmed just inside the boat and they added stuff to the material, like the soil. So maybe the local farmers, the Kurdish farmers living nearby, there's a village nearby, maybe they did this. But usually when you're doing farming work, especially for fertilizing, you're going to see an increase in phosphate, and phosphate's the same inside and out. And then when we actually met one of the old villagers, he's 85 or so years old, and we asked him, "Do you remember what this valley was like, back when you were a kid?" And he said, "Yeah." He said this boat shape appeared after an earthquake in the late 1940s. He said at first the whole valley was just very, even. The terrain, you could walk on it. They were doing haying. They were cutting the natural grass. They never fertilized. He said they were just cutting the grass that grew for animal food, and they still do that today in some of the areas around there. But he said they never fertilized it. And then after that earthquake hit, this boat shape appeared there, and all around it, the terrain became very uneven. Now they call it a landslide or earth flow. It's just all broken up. It's very unstable, but the ship shape is stable, and that stayed that way until so the world saw it because of the aerial photographs taken in 1959, and then 1960 was the first Western, ground expedition to the site. And so we just got recently, last year, we found out that I think it was Bill Clinton and or it was Bush. One of the or two of the presidents declassified the old spy satellite imagery from the 60s and 70s up to 84. And now on the United States Geological Survey, the USGS website, you can order declassified satellite images for like $30 a pop. And so I ordered, hundreds of dollars worth of this stuff, and we found the earliest photo. It was in '64 from the U.S. satellite, and it wasn't the greatest, but you can make out the shape. But starting in the '70s, when they upgraded the cameras on these spy satellites, they had some of the most amazing. I mean, it's really clear. You can see the site, and these are huge satellite images, so it covers a big region. And what we're
Mhm.
noticing as you're looking at we have these photographs for almost every summer until 1984. And you see the same shape all the way through. And of course, starting in the late '70s, a lot of people were going out there doing research, Ron Wyatt, David Fazold, and others in the '80s. So we have ground photographs. But my whole point is that all these photographs show that the ship shape has stayed there through multiple earthquakes, through all the different, uh, the earth flow moving around every winter, this unstable ground outside. Yet this ship shape, that's the exact length of Noah's Ark given in the Bible, has stayed the same shape from all the photos we've seen from the 1960, 59, 60 on the ground, the aerial photographs to the spy satellite. So it suggests that there's something below the soil that's keeping this shape intact. and that the soil itself is different. So, there's more work we're studying in regards to the soil, what's going on. And of course, we would love to the core drill. That's kind of our next steps. To do some more non-destructive survey work to penetrate deeper into the mountainside, and then bring a core machine in to get samples deep in there. And some of these, empty areas, voids, we want to put a camera down in there and see what we can, see what we can see down there.
Yeah, I mean, it's always like it's hard for me to like visualize a wooden boat being able to withstand that kind of strength. But I mean, I guess I don't know how it works. Like, it's probably fossilized to some degree. Or is it not that old enough to be kind of petrified?
There's a difference of opinion on what, and again, it comes down to we need to get down into there to see because so GPR, you're seeing denser material and on these angular structures. There's something that's holding together and preserving the voids. Um, so whether the wood has been decayed away and got replaced slowly over time and became a fossilized exact representation of what the wood was there before, or whether it's something similar to that, but not exactly fossilization, with just replacement material kind of filling in the voids, and then that is what the GPR is showing. Definitely, when the wood, if this is Noah's Ark, and I believe it is, as it decayed, the wood and whatever else material they used to build the boat, it has affected the soil so that it is a denser soil. So I do believe there's something down there that's based on just the,
Hmm.
the radar that has been preserved. I don't know if it's fossilized or just a different material that replaced what went away, what decayed away. Um, Dr. Sali, the geologist, will say, yeah, using fossilization, you'll need pressurization. You need a lot of material on top of it to squeeze down
Hmm.
and fossilize it. But others have pointed out that you can fossilize with mineral replacement. Like they've seen these hot springs where the wood was stuck in it, and after maybe a decade or less, the wood is now mineralized and hard as rock, and again it became fossilized.
Hmm.
We do want to get down into there, and we'll see what we can do this year and next year.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this is going back to kind of giving people like a visualization of what the GPR is
Mhm.
so in the very first Jurassic Park, when at the very beginning, when they get on they're on the dig with Alan Grant, and the two guys get on that big machine, and it like pops, so then they can see all these like the scans of the velociraptors under the ground. That's basically what it is, right? Are they still that big?
Okay, so what they use there, if I remember, that's the first Jurassic Park, right? Um,
Yeah.
they shot a shotgun or like a sound into the ground, and those sound waves
Hmm.
blasted through the rocks, and they were able to
Hmm.
in high detail map out. It was a movie in high detail. They could see
Yeah.
the whole bone structure of this dinosaur. So that is basically like seismic. That is another technique you can use. Now we were told it's probably impossible to get permission to use seismic there because we're basically less than a mile or maybe a little over a mile from the Iranian border. So this is a no man's land, even though it's a tourist site there now. It is militarized zone. And so you're not allowed
Mm.
to like use explosives there, or it will take a lot of effort to
I
get the
imagine.
permission. Yeah. But there are other techniques where you can go into the soil. So GPR, which uses a different form of size, it's like seismic, but it's not. It uses electromagnetic waves to, basically you're looking at the properties. These waves are going through the properties of the material, whether it's soil or rock or void, and it can map out those properties in the software now, and then it creates a point cloud. And behind me, I show one of our scan results. Maybe I don't know if I should share my screen. Or I can give these to you guys later, and you can insert them. But
Sure.
this is like one slice of data at a certain depth. Like I think this one is showing the right angles we were seeing that the American archaeologist from Atlanta, Georgia, who independent guy we hired just to look at our data, and he finds this 20 feet down and says, hey, there's a whole series of right angles, and if I were to do an excavation, I would do one right there. And
Yeah,
so
I mean, look at that. What else could that be but a boat, Or at least a structure, a building, It's there's something
yeah.
there.
Yeah, so maybe someone built a boat shaped barn, but we have had people who don't want to say it's Noah's Ark. They'll say stuff like, "Oh, it's a Mongolian, it's man made." They'll say, "Well, it's probably a Mongolian fortress." But we're like, what? What are you talking about? It's in the middle of a valley, and the hills are right above it, right there. So if it's a fortress, it's a very bad location. You can like shoot down
Yeah.
on top of them. One other person I saw, they left comments on my YouTube. There's this a small minority view that it's a replica of the real Noah's Ark that landed up on Mount Ararat, the big volcano. So they said, well, this one here is the replica. And how do you know that? Maybe this
Wow.
is the
Well, I mean,
real. you know,
even building a bootleg Noah's Ark is
it's kind of
a pretty
cool.
big feat, I would say. But
Well, yeah,
and they
look at
went to a lot of
Kentucky.
trouble to hide it there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, there's a replica one in Kentucky at the Ark Encounter. For those who know that, there's a Christian group that made a theme park, and they claim it's the largest
Oh, really?
wooden building in the world, and it's almost the same size as our ship. It's 500 feet long, or a little over, and ours is 515 feet long. So if you look at the biblical count, so this is the thing that gets me. Is that not only do you have you're in the general location, the Bible didn't give you the GPS. It just said it's in the mountains of this kingdom called Ararat or Urartu. Um, and the Bible said it was a boat, so here we have a ship shape, a boat shape in the mountains of Ararat. But here's the key for me is that it's exactly the length given in the Bible. The Bible says it was
Mhm.
300 cubits. No, there was no inches and feet back then. But if you look
Yeah.
at what was the standard of measurement during the time that, if you believe Moses wrote the book of Genesis, you would realize that it says he was educated in Egypt. As the movies even show, the idea is that he was a prince of Egypt, well educated. So if he wrote these books in the Bible, at that time he would have wrote it. The Egyptian royal cubit was the standard, just like metrics. Outside of the U.S., metrics is the standard
Mhm.
today. And so if you look at 300 Royal Egyptian cubits, which is about 20.662 inches, so you times that by 300 of those, and then divided by 12, you get exactly 515 feet long. Now, I've been out there on a couple times when either tourists or other scientists have measured the boat on the ground, and now we can measure it on the computer with our LiDAR model, the 3D model, and the boat is exactly 515 feet long. And so here we have, you can say, it's a freak of nature or the replica. Well, they got the exact measurements right for that time in Earth's history. The late Bronze Age, if you believe Moses wrote it. And during that time, they used the Royal Egyptian cubit. That was the main standard of measurement. It's
Mhm.
almost, it matches exactly what you see in the ancient literature. Even historians outside of the Bible, you have ancient historians and they all talk about a boat landing in this region of the world. And they say that tourists, this is up to like 2,000 years ago. Some of these ancient historical documents, ancient historians and writers talking about Noah's Ark, they claim that pilgrims and ancient tourists would go see Noah's Ark. Like it was a thing to do back then.
Mhm.
And they would take little pieces of
Yeah.
it and so then since that time, the last 2,000 years, the location got lost until 1959 when they took an aerial photograph and they saw the ship shape on the side of the mountain. But so it wasn't just like a fable. People were going to see a ship thousands of years ago in the mountains of Ararat.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember hearing that there is some kind of like a, I don't want to say it like a shrine by it or anything, but like a uh it depicts, it is a depiction of a bunch of different animals that are, it's either right next to that mountain or close to it. And like you said, people it used to be a thing to go to, and people would talk about it and be like, oh yeah, that's where it is. Why is it so weird? Like, you know.
Well, so I know in the 1980s when Ron had basically free range to walk all over those hills, now things are more tightened up along the border, and in fact they have a border wall like Trump was trying to build on the Mexican border. They actually have that here. The Turkish government built a 20-foot high cement wall with an access road on their side, and so it's right above this site. You can even see the wall. So it's very difficult to go up close to that area. But it was in this area that Ron claimed that he had saw animal petroglyphs on there's a cliff right above the site. See if I can find a photograph on my slides here that might show the cliff. Um, and It's a black and white photo. Here's an older photo, but I don't know if you could see it. But at the very top of at the horizon there, um, there's this limestone cliff that's full of fossils, shallow water fossils, coral, um, seashells, all fossilized. And, limestone itself is sedimentary rock. But it was in the middle section of that limestone cliff that Ron was. I think it was the '84. He was up there just climbing over the rocks with his local guide, and he said he saw. He didn't have his camera. He said, but he said he saw a whole row of animals carved there, including animals that are not native to Turkey. He remembers seeing the elephant, for example, and a giraffe. So today maybe you'll see.
Yeah.
We've seen foxes and rabbits out there, and the locals say there are wolves, but you're not going to find a giraffe out there. So have that carved on a
Yeah.
rock, and that suggests that hey, there was somebody here who believed that hey, there were these type of animals that you see now, like in Africa, you know, roaming that mountainside. So I went up there a couple times, take special permission with the military to, as a foreigner, I'm an American living there, so it's very difficult to get access. But I have been up there looking. We haven't finished our survey. Then the other thing that Ron had looked for was any inscriptions on the Iranian border. And there were a couple, the Iranian Turkish border system is set up so that about every 500 feet, they have a stone pile, either just like they call it a border marker. And these stones are all
Mm.
cemented up. And so on some of them, Ron believed that he had saw some ancient inscriptions with the boat shape. So to verify that, because I've known friends and others who've tried to get up there and they're always denied. Uh, Now in 2022, we met a Turkish archaeologist, and she was able to get me permission. So herself and I and another official went up there with the commander for the military base, and so I had very specific instructions. I had my own drone, and the commander said, "Okay, you're allowed to." We wanted to photograph the other side, like all four sides of the markers, because some of Ron's old photographs, he was looking for inscriptions on the Iranian side of the markers, and the markers are actually on the exact international border between Iran and Turkey. So on one side,
Mm.
like half the marker, let's say it's 4 feet high. Half the marker is Turkish, the other half would be the Iranian side, and each side could possibly have inscriptions on these rocks that they used to build the marker. And we were just wanting to photograph it. When we first went up there, the commander said, "Well, it'd be easy if you could walk out there and take a picture with it, DSLR or your iPhone." But he said, "This is all mined, so you don't want to get blown up." So then the idea came around. So what if we used a drone and just flew around each marker and took pictures from all the sides? And that took a while to get permission, but I think it was about a month, not too long actually, about a month later, I was able to get my drone up there, and the commander said, "Okay, you cannot take any video, no wide shots of the whole border installation, what the border looks like, but you can only take pictures exactly of these zoomed in shots of these markers." So I was so nervous because he was watching over my shoulder with and he had his armed security, one of the soldiers that were, well, making sure we didn't attack him, I guess. And then we had the two Turkish
Yeah, with the big
officials.
guns.
Yes, and this was all a militarized
Jeez.
zone. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm flying because they told me you can fly your drone into Iran. And I'm thinking, okay, because I had to get on the Iranian side to take the pictures. And I'm just thinking, well, what if do the Iranians know this? This thing we're doing. I hope that are they going to shoot down my drone, or is it going to land on a mine and blow up? And
Yeah.
they're not too cheap. So I was able to photograph. It was very stressful because he was watching the screens. I had a DJI drone, the Chinese drones, and I got
Yeah, I
photographs
have one of
up.
those too myself.
Yeah, so this one I used is the Mavic. At that time was the Mavic 2 in the 2022. And so we I photographed all what do we do? Three or four of the border markers. And one time we went down the access road in his little army Jeep to the next marker, and you're kind of below the wall, and the marker itself is behind the wall on a hilltop. So when I flew the drone over there, the signal, obviously I'm at the bottom of almost a hill on this access road. So I lost signal with the drone, and that freaked me out. I was like, "Oh no, I took all these photos. It's on the memory card on the drone. I don't want to lose it now." Um, Thankfully, I was able to go fast enough. Somehow the drone knew, and it went up, and I was able to finish. But when I looked at my memory card later, that Iranian side for that one marker was not documented. I was pushing the camera button to take the picture, but it didn't receive the command. But anyway, so that's kind of some of the research we
Oh,
do out there. We did not notice any ancient inscriptions on those markers. We saw Farsi numbers and stuff like that, but we're still, doing the survey work where, Ron believed he had saw the ancient petroglyphs of the animals, the giraffes and the elephants, and so I would love to see that. So we're doing our best. There's a lot more work to do there, so we're not only trying to keep the visitor center going, because that's where the tourists come and see, put information in there. We have new videos we're producing for it because the governor's office has asked us to make a new Turkish English video. So we have posters in there. Before we got involved in this visitor center building that the Turks had built in '87 due to Ron Wyatt's efforts and Dr. Salih Bar Tutan's efforts on the site. Well, they built this building and then it stayed empty. When I showed up 10 years later in '97, there was nothing in there. There's some posters. We put up new posters, I remember that year, but the very small posters, we put them on the wall. They had a little glass display where people had put fossils in. So in 2022, we were able to renovate the whole building, put up huge posters, put in a video at that time, mainly in English, for the tourists to see. We have a huge fossil collection from the things we found nearby or in that mud flow. And now we've even found pottery just right near the boat shape, which we have not analyzed yet, but we've collected a whole bunch of pottery last year and the year before, and we're going to, get archaeologists involved to see, how they can date it. But yeah, so that's kind of what we've been doing the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years there.
wow. Um, so I mean, I know it's on a mountain and is it close to any kind of like an urban area or like a city for people that are worried about like a mud flow or anything?
Well, there's a little village, so this area is mainly the ethnic area, the ethnicity of the people are mainly Kurdish out there. Of course, it's Turkey, so you have Turks and everyone living in the area too. But the nearest city it's called Doğu Bayzet, or in English you might pronounce it Dogu Bayzet. And we're on the south side of the big volcano, Mount Ararat, which is the tallest mountain in Turkey. It's like this. It's over 16,000 feet high. I don't know the exact elevation of it, but so I think it's similar to Mount Shasta, for those from Northern California, or Mount Rainier in Washington. So it's a huge volcano. It's a stratovolcano or a composite. And so if you look at the geology of that area, there's a lot of volcanic activity going on, and there's still a lot of seismic activities. Just like California has a lot of earthquakes, Turkey has the same
Mhm.
thing. And so I've been there when they've had small earthquakes. I felt one a number of years ago, very short, like, jolt. But the mountains that this site is on is the lower mountain range, just again 17 or so miles south of the big volcano. It's still in the mountains of Ararat, this big region that the Bible said the ark landed in. And so you were 30 minutes. So if someone wants to go out there and see it, we offer tours. They can come on their own. They can contact us. We can tell them how to do it on their own. But you have to fly into a nearby airport. There's one on the north side of the mountain called Igdir. And then from there, it's about a 55-minute drive to Dobajzet, where they have the hotels. So it's a border town or city. There's about 200,000 people there. And so you have a lot of, Iranians coming through and truckers and, the international trade going on. And then to get out to the Ark site, you can take a taxi or go on one of our tours. And it's about a 30-minute drive to go from the hotels up into the mountains. And you're right near this one village called Uzungeli or Mashar, the Kurdish name. And they have a visitor center right there. It's a paved road all the way to the visitor center. So if you have a steep road, but if it's not icy or snowing, you can get up there just fine. And so every year I'm there. Usually I'm there in the summer months through the late fall. But we have tourists from around the world show up. This last year I gave lectures for a Japanese group. Taiwanese, and they're not even Christian. They were there as a culture tour, but they're interested in the science and what we're doing here. And so that was really fun explaining that. And then you have a lot of Americans and Eastern Europeans, some Russians and Ukrainians. It's very popular now to climb Mount Ararat. It's a trekking, sporting thing to do. You climb the tallest mountain in Turkey. And the name is a biblical name, Ararat. And so you have thousands of tourists climb the mountain every year. It's very easy now to do. So you have a lot of tour groups taking people up the mountain, and then when they finish there on their off day, they come to our site. And so we're getting, the Turkish tour companies bringing, 40 to 50 people at a time on their group with their groups, coming through, stopping at the visitor center, watching our film, taking pictures of the boat shape, from that hilltop where the visitor center is at. And so it's great. We get to network and talk to them, answer their questions.
Yeah, I just I come from, so my wife and my mom are both involved in like government planning and that kind of thing. So I'm always thinking of like, well, what kind of site surveys do they have to do? What kind of soil samples they have to do? What kind of like all of that stuff to be able to get the permits to dig there, to actually get down and see what's there. Like what's involved in that in Turkey?
Yeah. So yes, you're dealing. Someone's always asked, well, why haven't they excavated this site yet? It was discovered in '59. Then
Mm.
it kind of just lost interest until the late '70s, and then in the '80s it had made the news a lot. Till the early '90s, maybe it kind of died down, and then it hit the news. And basically from 2019, the month after we did our survey, our the geophysical survey, it picked up in the news, and now almost every other month it seems like some news articles being written talking about the site, especially this last year. Maybe that's how you heard about it too, because
Hmm.
last year we had the GPR, the new analysis that showed the corridors and the central room that was announced, and we also had the soil test results announced. And I forget who contacted me. I think it was a British newspaper. We didn't even put it out ourselves. It was somebody contacted me saying, "Well, hey, what's the latest?" And we weren't ready. And I was like, "Oh, well, okay." I thought about it. Okay, well, I can tell you like what we're working on and some of the general information. And then CBN, Christian Broadcast Network, they interviewed me. Then we had Fox, and then NBC News came out for the Today Show just 2 months ago when I was there, and so that was actually really good. They were there for about 4 days filming the activity, and we had a friend brought in 40 Americans on his tour group, so that was kind of fun. They can film the tourists talking about why they came out there, but to get the permits, usually you have to work through a Turkish university or Turkish scientist, and they know the system.
Mm.
They're filling out the paperwork, and again, it's not easy. It's not like going and getting your driver's license or something.
Right.
You have to know Turkish, and then you need someone who has who's associated with a organization there, usually a university. And so it is taking us a lot of work. We just I'm here in usually January. I'm not doing anything on my tours or research. It's snowing at the Ark site. In fact, my friends who live there, the Kurdish
Oh wow.
farmers, they sent me videos, and the whole thing's just covered in snow. And then even last 2 days ago, they had another big storm come through. So I usually take January as my downtime, and a friend owns a hotel in Switzerland, and so I just relax here. But we actually brought in the Turkish
Oh.
scientist who's been studying this site. He's the geologist; like he knows almost every rock it seems out there. He can explain all the layering. He can answer the critics who can say, "Oh, it's naturally." We filmed him answering all these questions, and we haven't released. We just finished a couple days ago. He flew back to Turkey the day before yesterday, and so we have all this good video content we're going to edit and put out YouTube shorts and other videos. But with him here, we were also working on the permits and the plans, I should say, to apply for the permits to do the next phase of the research. And there's some new technology that he told me about that we want to use that can go deeper into the ground than GPR. And then there's some other satellite technology we want to use, and then, of course, if possible, if they will allow it, which is it's a big if, core drilling. But the holes we want to core in, they're not that big, but there's definitely you have to put a hole in the site, and they're very protective of it. It's a very fragile site, but our goal is to study it and then by studying it, we can help protect it, get more people interested in it. And so all that takes
Hmm.
a lot of time and effort to get all that down, all the type of equipment you're going to use, the approximate dates or how long you're going to be doing this on the site. All that has to be put into a Turkish document and then work its way through the different levels of bureaucracy in Turkey. Thankfully, we have a
Yeah.
number of people who know, like, we randomly met some guy at the Ark who was a friend of a friend, but he was in charge of this certain government. I'm not going to name what it is, but he's a Turkish official, and he is good friends with Erdogan's family, who's the president of Turkey. And so he told me, I gave him a private tour of the site. We went down there, and then I did something. I helped them on some other projects after that, out for something else. And we've always kept in contact, and I meet him whenever I'm in Ankara, and this guy, which is the capital city. And he has
Hmm.
told me, he said, if you, whenever you're ready and what you need done there, I can get the permission, push it through. So I'm like, oh, thank you, God, and thank you for this man.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's always been the issue. Is like, just like anywhere in the Middle East, it's a relationship thing where you need to know someone who knows someone
Yeah.
basically, and so this was again a random person who came out there, and then we know a couple others who are well connected in the scientific community too. And I do give presentations at the local university, and they every 2 to 3 years they have a conference they do about Noah's Ark and Mount Ararat, everything from the local foods to the geology. So it's not just about Noah's Ark, to about archaeology and things like that. And so at that, when they do it every 2 years, I try to our team, whether myself or others, try to present papers about the latest research we've done on the webinar boat site. And so that helps and so the university has actually, in fact, have helped sponsor my visa there multiple times because of this effort, and I've helped, promote their conference and bring in American scientists to give presentations or for financial support and things like that. So we have a good working relationship with the local community. And of course, we have this connection now with some of the higher government officials, in Turkey.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't get higher than Erdogan, right?
No, maybe we'll invite him out
Um,
there.
so
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. So what you don't have to get any kind of input or permission from the Iranian government, do you?
No, so our site is right. You can see the border wall installations right from our site, but it's all 100% in Turkey. The only permission, and they said they got it. I wasn't sure. Was when I flew that drone because I had to fly into Iran to document the other side, and so they said they had to call their counterparts. The military commander called the Iranian commander on the other side, saying, "Hey, we were doing this. Don't shoot it down, I guess. I wasn't sure how it all worked. I just knew
Yeah.
that they said I could fly it. So, and later on, I
Yeah.
looked back at it. I'm thinking, wow, here I am, an American, and I flew a drone into Iran. That maybe that's something I shouldn't even talk about anymore because maybe that'll get me in trouble with somebody
I
else.
mean, that's a that's a cool flex though.
And I'm not trying to, but again, it all comes down to if you look at it, I was doing computer coding in Sacramento from let's say I started working in the HP, then Agilent warehouses in the 1998, 99, and then I was doing customer support for Agilent Technologies. I think they still have offices there in Roseville. And then from there, I started doing computer science work, programming for their warehouses because a friend of mine who was my boss at the time, he invented this warehouse system software to manage all their parts. So I was doing that, and then I got hired by the California Peace Officers Association, which is the prison guard union, and for the Benefit Trust Fund, CCPOA, BTF. And I was there for a while, and then I got into iPhone and Android app development during the gold rush. And so I had that as a serious side job. And
Ah.
then I went 100% into that in 2014. But then I phased all that out. I was doing all these trips at that time, mainly to Saudi Arabia, but even looking for the real Mount Sinai that, again, Ron Wyatt and others believed it was in Midian and not in Egypt. and that's another story, another thing. But that brought me to the Middle East a lot, and I was working for myself, so I had this free time. But when I started doing this, people who wanted to hear about it, they would contact me and say, "Hey, can you come to my house or to my church and give us a presentation about what you're doing over there?" And then when I did that, then people started wanting to go with me, say, "Hey, can I come with you on your next trip?" So that kind of brought in the tourist business because they wanted to bring their friends, and I was like, "Okay, I need to make this a little more formal." Um, but I wasn't planning. I wasn't planning to live in Turkey. It was the pandemic hit, and I was there, and then my local friend said, "Why don't you stay here? It's a relationship thing. If you stay here, you'll get to know the locals. You'll get to make friends with the officials. You can do a lot more work than trying to email us, from California. Plus, it's cheaper to live there,
Mhm.
a lot cheaper than California. And I did. So I stayed,
I
and
bet.
it was not planned, but it worked out that way. And so when these things happen, we meet a certain official, or the doors open to go do this drone work on the border. It's not like I sat down and said, okay, this year I'm going to fly a drone into Iran. It just happens that, we want to do something. We find somebody who can help us, and maybe it takes a year to get the permission or 1 month, but we do our best, and then, that's what happens.
Yeah. So how do you ever make it back to Sacramento at all?
No, I haven't. So I have actually relatives. My brother lives there, and then my sister and her husband, they live in Northern Cal. My parents sadly passed away in 2019, and
Mm.
so once I was renting a place in Lincoln there, if you know these areas. But anyways, in
Mhm.
2019, not only did my parents die, but my landlord decided to sell the house, and so and I was overseas in Turkey at the time that happened. So thankfully, my brother and a sister and some friends, they boxed up my stuff, put it in storage. And I had, I don't know, just once the pandemic hit, the last time I was there was January 2020. And then I had a tour in Saudi. So I went to Saudi Arabia, and then I went to Turkey to visit some friends. And I remember I was in Turkey end of February, and I had a tour for Saudi coming up in like 2 or 3 days, and we got the news that they're closing the borders. Like Saudi was very strict. They're closing it, so you couldn't even leave the country. And I called, like I contacted and emailed everyone on the tour. We had like 20 plus people. Say, hey, you can't come. The borders are closed. And I was talking to my friend there who I was staying at his
Wow.
house, and he said, he actually had surprised me, had built a little condo on his. He lived outside of town in Doe Bizet, and he had a little condo he had built for me. One room. I don't know if you call it a condo, but it had everything I needed in one room. And he said, I built
Yeah.
this for you. Why don't you stay here? We'll get your visa extended. And we don't know how long. That time everyone was fearful. We didn't know how long the borders will stay open or closed or whatever. And
Hmm.
Noah's Ark was kind of, this was 2020, and so October is when we did the radar scans. We had the Science Channel there, and in November we had the first big cycle of Noah's Ark news stories. Went around the world about the scans that were done in 2014, but they interviewed me for the story because I was there during those scans. And so this started this big cycle, and so it was all positive, and we had this momentum for Noah's Ark, and my friends like, just stay here. We can build on this momentum. Even though the borders are closed, you can, visit the Noah's Ark site every day because it was 30 minutes away. And it worked out. I was able to help the locals, the families that manage the visitor center, the people that are, it's a very touristic town, not just border, importing and exporting goods, but they base their livelihood on tourism. So when the pandemic hit, a lot of people were suffering. And so it was, God had put me in the right place, I believe, because I was able to help some of these families I knew. We would deliver groceries. Oh, they were totally broke. They had no way to make any money. So about once
Mm.
or twice a month, I'd fill up a taxi with the groceries from the store, and they would drive it up to the people's homes. So it was a way for me to help the
Wow.
locals, and they never forgot. And so whenever we needed something done, or these are all people we work with almost every day now. And so it was great being there. I think I wish I could travel more during that time, but we really focused in on the ARC research, and that's when we also did a lot more work on the border. That it's kind of during that time that we did the drone work up on the border, and it got us to our next phase where I reconnected with Dr. Salih Barak Tutan, who's now a good friend. We flew him here to Switzerland. Did the second time we've done this, interviewed him. working on the plans. He did the soil test for us from 2024. Um, so yeah, I think it was a good decision to stay there. Right now, I just have no desire to go back and live in the United States.
Yeah, you quit California cold turkey.
Yes. The only thing I
You
miss
know?
Oh, good,
sometimes,
good
and
one,
people
Josh.
might laugh at this,
Cold turkey.
they sometimes like what. So what do you miss the most? And when you're doing some work out there in Turkey, sometimes it's great when you can just go to one shop and just get what you need. Like you can do it in California very easily. Home Depot, for example, or a large grocery store like Walmart or Target or something. Costco, none of that's there. They have one store called Biz. I forget what it's called, but anyway, it's a whole sale. Like so, if you own a business or like sell a small market, you could buy a whole case of Coke at a cheaper, discount price. And that's the
Mm,
closest thing to Costco they got, but it's very small. And so, sometimes it's difficult trying to get things done because you basically have to go online, or sometimes we just ask somebody to come to Turkey. If there's a tour group coming through, we say, "Hey, can you bring this equipment for us?" It's cheaper for them to put it in their checked-in luggage, and then for us to try to import it in and then get held up in customs or whatever. And then
yeah.
I do miss Taco Bell. So,
Oh,
just
really?
I should say some Mexican food. Mexican food is one of my favorites, and so there's a couple Mexican restaurants in Istanbul, the largest city in Turkey. There's like 20 million people there, so they have a large variety, but they don't have the right flavor. It just
Really?
doesn't taste the same as what I remember. But yeah,
Well,
but
we're
anyway,
spoiled with that here in California.
oh yeah, all the ethnic foods, Chinese, Thai. I love Thai, but
Yeah.
the one thing I realized when I look back, what I don't have in California is I can, in Turkey I can drive a half an hour to 1 hour. I'm going to see something that's 5,000 years old, 4,000 years old, a castle from the time of Ur
Yeah.
II, or Noah's Ark, biblical sites,
All right.
historical sites that, okay, I can go to Fort Sutter or whatever, or Old Sacramento, but
Yeah.
it doesn't compare to these biblical
Yeah. Gold
sites.
country. I mean, that's the oldest thing out here, you
Yeah,
know? It's,
Native
I,
American ruins, but yeah, it's still it's not
mhm.
what I'm really into biblical archaeology, so nothing against those other sites. For me, I love being right there in the middle of where you can almost say civilization restarted. When Noah's Ark landed, this
Mhm.
is where mankind restarted and repopulated the earth. So it's been a blessing to be able to live right there. It wasn't planned that way. I do have some other
Yeah. I mean,
slides.
yeah, please. Let's
I
see what
want
you got.
I want to show you this. So when we talk about the shape, because this is something you might see on the internet, someone might talk about saying, well, this ship shape. Again, this is before we announced our soil test, showing that the soil is different inside this boat shape. But they'll say, this was a freak of nature. As the dirt came down the mountainside, it hit a big rock and then went around it and then formed this shape. The problem is the people who say that usually they've never been out there, and so if
Mm.
this was created because of mud or earth, flowing around an obstruction like a big boulder, then this is what happens. I don't know if you could see this video playing right behind me.
Oh, yeah.
So my camera's auto. Let me move my head. There you go. So and I can give you this and you can add in later if you want. But anyways, let's say this is a rock. So this is showing fluid dynamics. And this is the video I just found on the internet.
Mhm.
Um, and so as the liquid, like mud or water, goes from uphill downhill, hits the rock, it builds up the material on the upper end of the rock. So that's your kind of like your oval, rounded end, and then it goes
Mhm.
downhill past the obstruction. If I move my camera, come on, follow me. There we go. And it forms a pointed end downhill. That's how fluid dynamics. This is like air going around the wing of an airplane. It does the same thing.
Mhm.
This site here, if you look at it, here's a good diagram, and my camera does not point. But if you see, again, you have this rounded end and the pointed end. Well, this site shows this picture here shows that the pointed end, which normally, if it's fluid dynamics creating this shape, it would be downhill. It's actually uphill, and so it's a complete opposite of what a natural shape would form. So if you see this pointed end, this is the uphill southern end of the boat. And the very bottom end of the boat, which is the northern end, the downhill end, is rounded. And so this shape was not formed because of mud going around a big boulder. And so then you have to ask, well, then how did it get there, this shape? You have a ship shape that's exactly the length given in the Bible. Here's another photo. I think yeah, we talked about the size. Here's one of the older, this was 1959. This is the very first photo taken of the object, zoomed in. Um, and when you do the measurements, here's the quote about the cubit. Here's a photo I took in one of the museums. I think this was, let's see, what museum was this? This might be this is in Cairo, but I forget which museum. Anyways, this is a cubit rod. So, like we have a yardstick. Well, in ancient Egypt, they had
Hmm.
a cubit stick, and that was like the official measurement. And when you measure that, that's 20.62 inches. And Moses said that Noah's Ark was 300 of those. And so, here's the exact, official cubit rod from. This was found in the tomb of the treasurer for the pharaoh Tutankhamun, the famous pharaoh. And so his treasure was buried with one of the cubit rods. And so 300 of those is 515 feet, and that's exactly the length given, the length of the site we're at when you would measure out from end to end, exactly 515 feet. Here's
It
one
would
thing
be
I want
quite
to.
a coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. Coincidence. Here's one thing I
Yeah.
want to point out because I don't know if this idea just got started because people making false claims saying, "Oh, we saw a perfectly preserved boat up on the volcano in the glacier, back 100 years ago," and then those stories get repeated in churches and books and never a photograph showing it. But so you have this idea that it's a perfectly preserved somehow, and then it get ground to dust by the glacier or on this active volcano. The last eruption was 1840, but still, it's a stratovolcano. So that means this mountain was built up by subsequent eruptions. Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, these are all stratovolcanoes. So they have composites or layers from every eruption that makes the mountain taller and taller. Somehow Noah's Ark landed on there, well preserved. That's some of the stories you'll see on the internet. They say, "Oh no, this is not Noah's Ark, the site we're working on," but no, it's up there on that volcano. If you realistically, a wooden vessel would be just like this. This is an excavation photograph from a Viking wooden burial ship found in the 1930s. It's called the Sutton Hoo, a very famous one. Netflix made a film about this. It's found between World War One and World War Two. And when they excavated down, they just found the shape of the hull. All the wood was gone. They found not fossilized because they oxidized rivets, iron rivets, thousands of them left in place. And it was a burial ship, so they found a lot of gold and silver. I'm going to show you a photo from a book here. I just got this in the mail at the hotel I'm staying at. But it's the photo there. But I'll hold it up to the camera. You can see this, it's like the rib,
Yeah.
it's like a
Wow.
skeleton. Now that's all dirt
Like
because
the keel.
yeah, that's the hull. And then you
It's
have the
all
ribs
dirt.
going up. And this is what they
Hmm.
excavated in the soil. It was just a big
Like a
mound.
cast.
They have more of these mounds in like Norway, where the Vikings were at. But what it shows is that as these wooden vessels decayed, and a good example of a wooden vessel, if you look in archaeological literature, look at the Byzantine ships, Greek or Roman ships. Some of them are found now above water because the what you call it, the sea level has changed, and so these ancient ports are now exposed, and they can excavate and they'll just find bits and pieces of the hull shape down below. And so here's an example comparing, and maybe I should just turn my, well, it's auto. I don't know how to turn that off. I'll just move my head so it's gonna be funny. Anyway, I'm trying to get to show you this whole row. And I can share this photo maybe. Is there a way I can share this on the screen?
Yeah, you just hit the share at the
Okay,
bottom there.
share
And it should
and
be able to
then
share the screen.
presentation. Okay, did it not do it? Oh, I hit screen. Okay. I gotta pick which screen I'm going to share. Okay, where is Keynote?
Yeah.
Here we go. No, it's not Chrome. It's a window. Which window? It's this window. It's the one on the TV. There we go. You see it now?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
There it is.
Yep.
Awesome. Oh, awesome. So this site on the right, that is those are photos from different angles of our Darup. You know, it's called the Darupinar site because of Captain Darupinar who found it. That's the boat shape we're investigating. The photos on the left are different examples of wooden vessels from, you know, not the same ship, but different ships around the world. And you can see whether they're underwater or above water, how a wooden ship decays. And this is what you should expect. And so we're looking not for a perfectly preserved boat in the ice on some high volcano. No, we're looking at a buried ship that's decayed away. So that's why we're doing stuff like soil analysis. GPR, it's a very fragile site. Let me go back and show you some of the photographs. And now that I'm sharing the screen, I want to show you the GPR, the one I mentioned earlier. It had the right angles. Here we go. So you see that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh
so
wow.
this is the one that was 7 meters down with our 100 megahertz antenna. And this was the 2019 scans where we had the Science Channel, which is owned by Discovery, and we're out there doing the work in front of their cameras. And about 6 months later, the American archaeologist, who had nothing to do with our research, but we hired him to look at the data, he found us. And he said, "Look, this is where I would excavate. Right here, we're seeing a whole series of right angles and angular structures. We don't know if it's man-made or natural, but that's the best place to do it because if this was just random, you know, soil and rocks, you're not going to find these type of angular structures. And here's an example. This is a
Mm-hmm.
top-down view showing, again, you see these parallel lines coming in, and this is at the bottom end, inside the boat shape here. I was looking plan view, looking top-down on it. And now, what
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show you next is what I talked about this American geophysicist who studied our stuff. You know, Dr. Sally recommended her. She had 30 or 40 years experience. She owns her own company somewhere, I think it's in New Hampshire. You know, geophysicists, they use radar. They use all these type of technologies that mainly for oil exploration or energy. Um, but they also get hired by archaeologists. And so here's the first thing she was showing us. So the blue, that's the ship shape. So the blue is just like soil, nothing, nothing going on out there. The that's the dark blue. The light blue, you can almost see this hash mark, this framework kind of appearing, this light blue on the the top
Mm-hmm.
part. And then the red, she was saying those are empty void. This is like an air pocket, but it wasn't just a small little pocket. That void there, you see that red thing in the middle, that goes from about 6 meters all the way down to 13 meters. So almost 20 some feet. And we lose the data because our radar doesn't go that deep. The 100 megahertz stopped at 13 meters. So it could possibly keep going down. And so it was like a central room. And then what she was saying was really interesting was that you have this corridor, this red line going down the center of the boat all the way and meets the top of that center room, that center cavity. And then, as I mentioned, there's a broken
Mm-hmm.
up one, and this is about. It starts this central tunnel, or I call it the hallway. It starts about 4 meters below the soil. So if you think in feet, you know, it's a little over 12 feet down. But then, if you know, this is 3D data, so we can slice and dice it and turn the model around. So as you're looking through the data, it continues that air pocket, that central corridor, for at least 2 meters in a lot of places. So you know, you look at 6 feet. So you can definitely walk through parts of it. And then there's a broken up one following the inside edge right up here, um, right above that central tunnel. That's following the inside edge of the hull, the boat shape you see above ground. So again, this is all data below the surface because we have not, you know, because of the how fragile it is, and maybe there's some new technology that'll be invented. But right now, they're not going to allow us to put a big hole in it, you know, like a traditional excavation,
Right.
which would, you know, they say archaeology is destructive science, so you would destroy the site when you try to understand it. So we're trying to use all other types of technology. And here's a graphic designer out here in Switzerland. He kind of highlighted for those who can't see what we're seeing. You know, to me, it's not like you're looking at the clouds and just making up stuff. This is actual data going. You know, you're seeing that is inside the boat shape. That, and here's a closer view, especially that top end pointed end. kind of, it makes sense. If you have if it is a boat and you had the story of Noah's Ark has animals on it and rooms with food and all that. How do you access those areas? You would have to have a open, we call them hallways or corridors to get there. We even made a video
Mm-hmm.
for NBC. I don't know if I have it on this presentation. Looks like I don't. But on the Today Show, when they came out there, we made an animation that took this data and combined it with what you see above ground, and then faded into or the GPR, and then faded into a 3D reconstruction of what could possibly be the arc. And so here's just what a German friend of mine, who's a 3D graphic designer, made, trying to show, this is the exact length. This is, of course, on a scale. And then you would have corridors and hallways and stairs going down in there. Now, I mentioned, here's the slide I want to show about the soil work. So here's our photo. We had this was September 2024. We had Bill and his wife. He's the guy with the tallest guy with the hat. His wife Monique beside him in the pink shirt, and then two Swiss friends there. And then I'm on the right side. But behind, look where the arrow is pointing. So that's the color difference in the grass. That's what we noticed. Wow, this grass is yellow, and all
Mm.
the grass around it, outside of the ship shape, is different color, greener or mud or whatever. So that's when I told Bill and the Turkish geologist, Dr. Salih, I said, "Hey, let's figure out what's going on there." And so the two of them, here are some of the approximate locations where we took the 88 samples. They picked 22 sites, and they took four around the site to give an average of the soil. And this is the approximate locations of some of those locations. I'll just show it on the screen. This is what I got when I was in Switzerland last year. Sally had taken a photo and sent it to me on WhatsApp, and he said, "Here you go." And I'm like, "What can I do with this?" So it was kind of blurry at the time. So I told him that, send me the actual PDF, and I can then analyze it. And we, so I, even now, they always say, Grok or ChatGPT is always getting better. And so every so often I'll upload the same results and just ask it the same questions, see what else it can find. And AI has helped us a lot, whether planning for future work, the type of things we should analyze in the future. But it's all saying the same thing. And what it shows right here was what I mentioned earlier. And so you'll see at the very top that, let's look at that closely. It says, oh, that's the pH. And so on the right hand side, everything that says yes, that means there's a significant difference between the inside and outside of the boat from these random soil locations. Um, and so the biggest thing is the one that says organic matter. You look at that,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the difference between the two. And I don't have. Let me the one that actually shows the percentage difference. Let me share that with you guys. It's on a Chrome. Here we go. I think it's this. Yes. I'm going to change the sharing. You guys, I don't know if you could see that. Does that show up well? Do I need to make it
I can
larger?
see it.
You can see it. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I had the screen kind of small there in the corner. So this is actually from a paper that we're writing. The Bill mainly is writing, and two geologists are writing that they hope to submit to a peer reviewed. So it's just a section because it's not submitted yet. So we're not showing the whole paper, but it shows the change in location. So of the six things we analyze, we also analyze for rare earth minerals, but for these six factors that were tested, we have 30, as I mentioned, there's 38% or 138% change. So there's 38% higher inside the boat versus outside for potassium. And pH, now this is a logarithm, so the scale is not like, oh, it's 1%. No, it's eightfold difference with the pH. It's still acidic, but I think, I think that means acidic, but anyways, it is still higher than you say something that was like water or something that you would drink. But again, these are random soil samples inside and outside the boat. The general average inside the boat is eightfold different from just right outside. Uh, and then, of course, the big thing that we noticed was this. And look at the level. This is at the 95% level, meaning, hey, like we're sure at 95% confident level that this is 138% more outside, I mean, inside versus outside. But look at this one. For the organic matter, we're at the 0.001. That's how confident we are, based on this is all math, based on the lab report that there's 200 and almost 250%, 2.5 times more organic matter inside the boat versus right outside. Yeah, and that's just um, that blows apart the criticism that those who say, this is just a random mountainside, a random shape on a mountainside, and the soil's going around a rock, and you get this ship shape, and there you go. And so now you guys are all excited about it. It's like, no, there's actually now chemical analysis showing that this ship shape is unique. It's distinct. It's been
Mm.
this shape all these years. For the last 60 plus years, we've taken pictures of this from 59 until 2026, the shape has not changed. And there's been multiple earthquakes out there, and every winter the soil is changing. So there's a stability to this site. There's something holding it together, and now we're having chemical results showing that when we run these through all this stuff, and I was asking like Grok or ChatGPT, okay, what would account for this? And then I threw out the theory. So let's say this is a wooden, I'm gonna say boat. This is a wooden building or a man-made structure made of a lot of wood. And then they say, yes, this is the type of results you would get if it was being, a decayed wooden structure. I'll just call it a structure, even though it's boat shaped. I'll just call it a structure. You would get this would
Mhm.
account for why would the pH be lower? And it talked about, I'm not a soil scientist, but we can have Bill. You can interview Bill, but the pH goes lower because of the acid in the soil. The wood releases acid, so it changes the acidity of the soil. Same with the potassium. Wood, as it has a lot of potassium in it, and so as it decays, it's releasing it into the soil more than what you expect in normal soil, which is what we see outside is the normal soil on the mountainside, and inside we're getting a lot higher potassium. And so then if you look down at what's not, like the last three, these are the things that, they're normal inside and out. There's no difference. The PTO, which is I think that's phosphate. Um, yeah, and that's where Bill was talking about because he does a lot of teaching to farmers on how to farm correctly and use fertilizers. And he was saying, look, here, phosphate, which you see a lot in fertilizer, if this boat shape was farmed, and you could say, oh, all this like higher organic matter, maybe the farmers were doing something there, then the phosphate inside and outside would not be the same if they're farming like just inside the boat shape.
Mm.
Because it is the same, you have to discount that they're using fertilizer because then outside it's all rough terrain, so you can't really farm out there and like plant crops. But inside, someone could say, oh, well, maybe they use this smooth boat shape area to plant a garden or something, or plant some wheat. But no, the phosphate's showing that it's the same. So lime, some people. In fact, this is interesting because some people say, oh, this structure is a limestone rock, sedimentary rock. And in fact, there's a peer-reviewed, which means other scientists looked at it, referee journal article published maybe 10 years ago by a Turkish geologist, and he claimed that the whole thing was a solid piece of rock that came down the mountainside, and then glaciers over millions of years etched out this, formed this ship shape and weathering in glaciers. Well, we all questioned if the guy ever went out to the site because the site is dirt. It's not. I mean, you see
Mm.
you see boulders and stuff out there. There's a central boulder there and a couple pieces, and there's like rock pieces here and there embedded in the soil. But it's a soil object. It's not a. And the GPR scans show that. And, uh, this is not a solid rock like this guy is claiming. And if it was a solid limestone rock, and the outside of the rock was this soil, then the limestone, as if you're looking at a limestone rock, this thing should be a lot higher, or there should be a significant difference between inside and outside, and you don't. It's the same. So, visually you can see it's dirt. Walking on it, the scan shows dirt, and the soil analysis shows that it's not being influenced by any lime or limestone there. And then even this is the salinity of the and nothing there to report back that's different between the two. So this is what this test result is what got everyone excited, especially that organic matter, because you're assuming that Noah's Ark was the
Hmm.
Bible says a wooden ship. Let me see if I have any other photos on my slide presentation, and then we can move on from there. Let me change it to this window. We're looking at this window, right? This one. I don't know. Right. Yeah. I just want to show. Okay, earlier, let's see. I want to show the original ship shape. I don't know if this is, that was. Here's maybe a better one. These are the early 1960 photographs, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. How this object has been there for 60 some years now, and there's erosion now around the edges, but it hasn't fallen apart. It's not longer than it was before. It's not sliding around, changing shapes on you. No, it's the exact same length,
Hmm.
width, and shape. Again, there's something below the surface and in the soil that's keeping the stability, and it's not random dirt.
Yeah. How deep is it? How deep was it supposed to be originally, and how deep do you think? How much is left
That's a
as
good,
far as how high it
well, that's
is?
a good question. So, our radar is only going down to 40 some feet or 13 meters. So there's more below there. And that's why we want to use some of this new technology that Dr. Sally Tuton mentioned to me that will let us peer deeper into the mountainside, and which will also give us. Let me just show you. This is an older photo. Let me, if I have a newer one that's zoomed out, it gives you kind of the idea of where it's sitting on this hillside, this valley that's on the mountain. Um, yeah, maybe this one, even though this is our group photograph, you can kind of behind our heads, you can see up there the horizon. That's the Iranian border where the clouds are, and then we're
Mm.
just right below the ship shape, which you see it was the yellow grass color. Um, this is this little valley. So this new technology or technology that we have not used yet on the ship, it'll let us even peer deeper into this mountainside to see the bedrock and the basement rock.
Mm.
So it will give us an idea of how deep everything is below the surface. And so we would like, hopefully this summer we can do that. That's it. And I'll just say this too. That's another thing. If I go back to this photograph, this is where the critics, and this is our soil location, but where the little X's are, where we took the soil samples. But there is in the middle of the boat this big 1 or 2 piece boulder. And so this is what critics will say. They'll say, oh, look, this is, the dirt went around this thing and created your ship shape, except as we talked about earlier, the pointed end should be downhill. It's the opposite, as the mud, if it's going around a boulder. And the other thing is the boulder's in the middle. It's not
Hmm.
up at the top end of where the boat shape starts. Now, what Solly will point out,
Right.
he says if you actually examine the geology, the chemical analysis, or just look at the rock, the boulder there, he says it's a type of limestone that comes from above. Let me go back to our other photo. Sorry for jumping around, but it comes from this ridge at the end of that red arrow. That's the ridge above it. That's limestone, and that's the ridge where Ron White was seeing the animals carved. It's up by the border, and I'm losing my voice here. One second. But so what Sally's pointing out is that this boulder that's in the middle of the ship, its original location is not this part of the mountainside because that type of rock is found much higher up near the top. Let me,
Mm.
so his theory is that it rolled down either with the ship. The theory is that when the flood waters receded, dried up after the flood, the ship landed much higher up on this mountain. Now, the top up there is about 8,000 feet.
Mm.
Its current location is 6,500. The top is where you have the Iranian border, and we have these large limestone deposits. And that rock, the big boulder that's in the middle of this ship shape, is actually from up there. So either when the ship came down and stopped at this location, the rock was already inside of it and came down with it, or it rolled down. You actually find throughout this mud flow or earth flow all the way to the bottom of the valley below, which is about 1,500 feet below the valley floor. There are huge, massive boulders just scattered around. So whenever this mountainside collapsed and created this rough terrain, it brought down a lot of debris, rocks of different sizes, including very large boulders. Where the boulders are today, that's not where they were at the start. Uh,
So, are the Ararat Mountains are also they're also in Iran? They're in Iran and Turkey.
A little into Iran, yeah. The Ararat Mountains are mainly in. Well, if you look at a map of Urartu, and this slideshow here is more of the update. I have a longer slideshow that has all these slides and has the map of Urartu or Ararat, and it shows the furthest, the greatest extent of that kingdom. It went up into Armenia, all the way into west into Turkey a lot, mainly in Turkey, and then some into Iran. So this ancient kingdom had a large territory, mainly mountainous. And so when the Bible says the ark, Genesis chapter 8 verse 4 says Noah's ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. It's a big area you can search for it in, which includes this site.
Hmm.
So
I'm surprised. I- I'm surprised that I mean it must be laying on some kind of bedrock or something because I'm surprised that the ground didn't swallow more of it up. You know what I mean?
yeah, I guess again it would depend on after the flood, what type of terrain was around it, and if this mountainside would cover it up that much. Now, so what we tell people, when you're there, you say,
Mhm.
"Oh, wow, it's dirt," but you see the photographs. You have this like the footprint of the boat. Um, but from the
Yeah.
scans, we're seeing stuff that's down. Like the first big layers are 9 feet, 21 feet. 4 feet. I'm not feet. Let's backtrack. Like some of the angular structure we're seeing at 3 meters, which is 9 feet. The tunnels we're seeing at 4 to 5 meters, so like 10 to 12 feet down. And then down all the way down to 21 feet are those right angles. So that's below the surface. So again, that suggests that it did get covered up a bit. But again, whatever's exposed to the air and to pilgrims and people coming, that would decay the most and decay first. So that's why we still have a shape there. And then this again, that one photograph I showed you guys, you're looking at different ship shapes around the world where they excavate, like wooden vessels. You see similar decay where it just leaves the bottom hull, or it just leaves the shape in place, like Sutton Hoo boat in England.
Mm,
Now this is a 61, so
Man, the evidence is irrefutable to me. I don't know. It looks like a boat in
yeah.
1960, 1969.
yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a good quote.
That's a boat.
Yeah.
Like this guy here, so he was Ohio State University expert, but the reason why he's kind of famous, he was on the 1960 expedition on the ground, and when they put out their public statement, he thought it was a little too negative. They were saying, "Oh, we didn't find any wood." They used dynamite in one spot, but he said there's nothing out there that would create this shape, and he was disappointed. He said, "I don't think a 2-day expedition where we just scratched the surface would tell us whether it's Noah's Ark or not." Now, the reason why he's famous is not only was he on the 1960 expedition, he was hired by, he was the world expert on photogrammetry, and he was hired by the Kennedy administration to study the CIA U-2 photographs over Cuba during the Missile Crisis. And then I don't know what year that was, somewhere in the
Mm,
50s or 60s. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact year that happened. But he was well known for his expertise in looking at photographs and identifying objects. And so he was part of that when they published and they showed to the world, saying, "Hey, the Soviets have put in these missiles and setting them up in Cuba." He was the one who identified them from the high altitude photographs. And so when he saw this of Noah's Ark, he's like, "That's a ship. There's nothing else." Um, and
yeah.
here, so now 2 years later, 61, the Turks
Um,
hired Ara Güler. He was a world famous photographer, mainly of sites around Istanbul, the big city, and some other sites. But they hired him, the Turkish army, and put him in a little plane. And he told this story on a Turkish documentary about this discovery of Noah's Ark. And he, 4 or 5 years ago, he was interviewed. He's passed away sadly, but he was put in a very tiny plane. He thought it was very cold, and they were flying through the clouds trying to find this site, and then the clouds opened up, and there it was. And so he was, this was no iPhone photograph. He had no digital camera, so I think he had I know it's a Kodak, but anyways, he in his museum in Istanbul they have his camera there that he used from a lot of his photography, and just maybe it's a 35 millimeter, but it was a film camera, and so he took all these amazing photographs of the ship shape from a low altitude. So these are not high altitude military plane. This is a little tiny like crop duster. I really like this one right there.
Yeah.
And you can see that the straight lines, or you can say the actual difference between inside and outside, just based on a photo alone, not even doing a chemical analysis. Here you can even see part of the wing of
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that,
the wing of the plane there.
yeah, something there. Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy looking.
Yeah, and I like this little
Is
animation.
it,
You can see how the site, as it decayed, you expect wooden ships to not keep exactly the same original shape. It's the same on any archaeological site
uh,
of a wooden ship. So you're looking at a kind of a little GIF animation here. My German friend did, where you're basically kind of squishing the ship back into shape. There's some areas where it bulges out a little on the that west side there. And so, but that's normal. And again, when you take the soil analysis throughout that area and compare it to the soil right outside the rim, you could call it, of the boat, it's totally different soil. So very interesting.
so he created this with basically uh extrapolating the data from the flows from the way that the mud was flowing,
Well,
the trends of the mud flowing and what it would have
Well,
done to the ship.
what he did, no, I don't think he did that. I think what he did here, he just took my drone, one of my drone photographs, or it might be our 3D model actually. Yeah, this is the photogrammetry model, and then because there's one area that's really kind of fallen out or bulging out there, you can kind of see at the bottom of the screen, and so he was just seen showing
Yeah.
how if you push it back into, because you're in a photo app, you can just kind of squish it back into shape. You get it more parallel, the sides, and more of the width given in the Bible. And then this is what it would look like when
Mm,
you were to morph between the two, what you see today versus more parallel sides to the boat. Um,
right.
let me see what else I got. Yeah, let's see this. Yeah, so this I think this is animation. Let me see if I can hit play. Yeah. So I don't know if you see this. So this
Hmm.
is our LiDAR model. So a half a billion points. You can see the shadows of figures because we had to have multiple things being done for that 1 week that they were here in 2019. They couldn't clear off the site and only have the LiDAR guy out there. So you'll see, and we haven't cleaned up the model, but you'll see shadows and shapes of individuals standing around doing different things. But so it goes from the LiDAR model and then it goes down underground to show the GPR results. Nowadays everything's cloud. It's a cloud point cloud. I'm sorry, model. So you can slice and dice it, zoom in and out, and then they combined the two models because there were two different systems. One was lidar, the other one was GPR. And even this lady who analyzed the data and found the tunnels, they just sent me a couple months ago a brand new model that I can now run on my older laptop. But I need to animate some of it. But it allows me to slice and dice it and zoom in and see the tunnels and turn on and off the layers. So I can like get rid of the terrain and just see what's below the ground. So it's amazing. We'd love to. There's some systems out there you just got to pay a lot of money, but we'd love to put this online. Just put it on our website,
Yeah.
and then people can like a 3D model, and they can look at it themselves and zoom in and out. Um,
I mean, this stuff it's hard to refute. The more that you see, the more. I mean, I tried to come in with kind of like a um trying to be optimistic, but not
yeah,
still have an open mind to it, but it's just hard to refute.
Yeah, so and this is why we had
Yeah.
Solly out here. This is a photo of Solly. He was climbing around the mountains, and I don't know, it's probably not the best photo of him, but this is a quote he gave. This is actually an older quote. This is not even the most recent one because we had him out here taking and doing videos with him. He has studied the site as a geologist, as a sedimentologist. What else has he's educated in? Has to do with oil, exploration and such. But he's been there from the mid '80s. '85 is when, at that time, Turkey had a military coup, so it was the military was running the country, and they brought him in. They said, "Hey, these Americans, who happen to be Ron Wyatt, David Fazel, and Baumgartner, they were causing quite a stir." This was '85 or '86, and so they brought him in to check it all out, and then they put him in charge of the Turkish committee to study the site. And his conclusion, even up to today, and on the train to the Geneva airport, I interviewed him on the train for some YouTube shorts, and I asked him specifically, do you think this is Noah's Ark? Why is it not? What do you think this rock caused the shape? Another thing they'll say, we mentioned the rock in the middle. We mentioned that the other guy said it was a solid limestone block. And then the other thing, some people say it's a syncline, so you can look that up on Google. But a syncline is these folding of the rocks. He says, look, this area, when you have a syncline, you have the anticline. It's like the opposite. And so as it's eroded, you will find on a regular syncline that this rock layers show up. It's a ship shape, but they're solid rocks, they're folded rocks, they're sedimentary rocks that do that. This is loose dirt. And so that's what people don't realize who've never been there. That this is just material. So
Mm.
how did this loose dirt gain this shape? And then he even said, look, if this was a syncline, the layers and the folds are going the wrong direction. It's not going on the. It's coming. I don't want to misquote him because I have it on video, and I'm not a geologist. But it's basically the opposite. If this was a syncline and solid piece of rock, um, this incline would form on a certain axis, and the way the valley is here, and all the folds going on this mountain range, it's a complete opposite. And so these people who write
Mm.
that stuff and even get it published, they have not either been out here or they're ignoring data that you can see clearly on Google Earth nowadays, or you could use my drone photographs. You can see all these layers. I've done pretty high, for what you can do with DJI. I've gone up to the highest that they allowed us in this area. What is that? Like 1,500 meters, I think. I think that was the Mavic 3 could do that. I forget. Anyways, we've gotten, or maybe it was 1,500 feet. But we've gotten high altitude photos of the whole mountain area. But you can use Google Earth too. And according to Sali, this object sitting there is unique. And you can't explain it by the surrounding geology. But if you ask him, you say, "Well, is this a man-made object?" Then you say it's both. He said it's been sitting there so long that you can't just explain what you're looking at by archaeology or saying, it's that it's man-made. He says it's been influenced by geology, by earthquake faults,
Mhm.
by sedimentology, by the flow of the debris around it, and of course, because it's a decayed boat, it's been covered up too by dirt, and so it's a combination. And so that's how he answers it. But he believes it's the location for the ark. He said it's the best possible candidate. There's no other, and that's why I tell people too. They ask me, "What's the percentage? Is this?" I can stop sharing this, but uh, people ask, "What percentage do you really believe it's Noah's Ark? Is it 100%, or is it what is it?" And I said, "Well, look, we're not going to find a plaque. At least I don't think we will. A plaque on the side of the boat that says "Built by
Mhm.
Noah and Sons." So we're not going to have
Yeah.
that type of inscription. What you have is a boat-shaped object, the exact length given in the Bible, in the mountains of Ararat that has chemical analysis showing it's distinct, that has geophysical non-destructive survey work showing angular parallel lines, patterns, tunnels, voids, all distinct inside the ship shape. So what else could it be?
Yeah.
And unless someone finds another boat, and usually the critics, there are even Christians who say, "Oh, that's this geology." and they'll attack what we're doing. I say, hey, I'm actually on a site that looks like a ship that's 300 cubits long, and we're doing research. You're saying Noah's Ark has to be somewhere else. Okay, until you can show me another site and present some data and photographs, then I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and not stop. So
Yeah, I mean it is a very I mean it's clear. I mean it's like I said, it's hard to refute. And I tried to come in without I tried to like check my bias at the door at the beginning, but it's like uh, I don't know, like literally what else could it be? There's so many coincidences that it can't just be a coincidence. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, and we'll keep moving forward. So we're hoping this summer we can do the new scans. The more we have to complete the soil analysis. What we showed today was some of the basic. There's more work we want to do on that, and then also the core drilling. I got caught. When this news hit last year, it was May especially. We had a lot of people interested. News Nation contacted us. They did all these interviews. CBN. And then New York Post did a story. They didn't contact us. They were just writing what they saw. But I got an
Mm.
email come in, and it was just from a lady. She's I'm the secretary, or whatever you call them now, executive assistant for this person, and the email had a link for the guy's name, and I was like, okay. And they said he would like to talk to you. I said, okay. So I clicked the name, and it brings up a Wikipedia entry. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm reading it. Oh, it's a multi-billionaire, and he owns all these different companies, and he's been in the news with some of his companies for certain things. So I said, okay, I better call this guy. I contacted a friend of mine who he does news. He's a national security expert. He appears on Fox News, and so I said, hey, this guy contacted me. He said, oh, Andrew, you better have your information lined up, your ducks in a row, because he's not there just to chit chat. He probably wants to either help fund the work or do something with the site. And so I said, okay. Anyways, after I got done with him, we scheduled a Zoom with the CEO, and it was a live. It wasn't like a fraud. He was on video with me talking, and he explained it. I said, well, what are you interested? You're doing all this other stuff. Why are you interested in our site? He said, well, one of his projects is, and maybe this will give it away. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but it had to do with prehistoric animals. I guess you'd call it that, resurrecting them. And his company was involved, and he said, look, we have equipment where if you were to drill into these chambers you're seeing on this boat shape, we could put this equipment down there and it could collect ancient DNA. And so that's when I was thinking of Jurassic Park and all that. And
Yeah.
it could then I could then see the whole like marketing for his company. Like you could own the first dog that came off Noah's Ark or something. I was just thinking like, well, okay, what's financially, what are they trying to do here? And anyways, that was a really interesting. That's probably the most interesting phone call I had. And the guy was super smart. Like he said, let me introduce myself, and then you can introduce yourself. And so he just went. I said, okay. So he went first, and he's like, blah, 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 this company, and I was like $5 billion, And okay, your turn. I'm like, well, I was a computer programmer. Now I live in Turkey, and I live in a little apartment. You know. Anyways, he was actually laughing. He was a nice guy, but anyway, it's been very slow. Who knows what will happen? They haven't funded anything yet, but he had put a biologist in charge of our project. I did a Zoom with her to see if everything was been positive. It's just been we'll see what happens. So hopefully he doesn't see this and think I'm.
Yeah.
If you're watching this, sir, sorry, but I do hope you fund. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's not, we'll keep doing what we're doing. But that was the most interesting phone
I
call.
mean, it's only a matter of time before like people that have the means will be able to see these kind of things and get so interested in it and want to take part in it that I mean it's really only a matter of time
And that's kind of the
before you get
goal.
that money, you get that grant money.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that is the goal because it's been, and that's kind of the reason why it's drawn out so long. You look at the initial attacks. When this site really hit the news was in the '80s. But if you look at that time period, you had a lot. I don't say a lot, but you had a number of high profile, well funded groups looking for the Ark up on the big mountain, the stratovolcano, Ararat, in the '80s. And so they were raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were going to churches, giving talks and lectures, and had films produced. And then you had this site across the valley trying to steal the attention. And so they immediately put out everything negative they could about this site. And that's kind of still
Mhm.
has affected it. So when you talk to, especially, who's interested in Noah's Ark? You're either a Christian or a Jew, Jewish person, or maybe Islamic scholar. But even then, you have a difference of opinion in all these religions of
And all
did
these
the flood
religions.
even happen? So it's a very small minority of someone who would be interested in Noah's Ark. And if they're a scholar, would they want to put their reputation on the line? Say, hey, I'm going to go
Mhm.
look for Noah's Ark. So the university, what they're associated with, they have to consider that too. So it's very hard getting scholars
Yeah.
involved, and that's why Dr. Baruch Tutan, who he's Muslim, but he believes in the flood account, and he's a believer in that sense. Uh, but he believes, just based on geological data, that it's not natural, that object, and the things we've seen there is best explained by a decayed wooden boat. So it's great having. He's still alive. I'm so thankful. He's 84, I think, and so we're using him as much as we can. The time lasts, and we always pray for his health.
Yeah.
But really nice guy, and so he was just here for a week in Switzerland, and I'll see him later this summer, and we'll see how far we get this year. But yeah, you got to get those higher. Someone asked me, "Well, what's your job, Andrew?" I'm not an archaeologist or geologist. I took classes in archaeology in college, and I loved geology, but I went into computer science because that was my parents told me that will pay your bills, and they were right. I didn't. If went to archaeology,
Yeah.
you're not gonna. I have a friend. He became an archaeologist, went as far as masters, and now he's working at something else, like outside of his career, and he has a lot of debt because if you're going to teach it, you got to get a PhD, and then you got to go back to school and you pay more
Yeah.
money. And so, as my parents said, you'll always be fundraising if you're just going to be an archaeologist. So we fundraise for this, but
True.
at least now I don't do computer science anymore. Our bread and butters like the tour groups we do, but it's tough when you're gonna if you're gonna be an archaeologist and then focus on this. Salih has told me as a geologist, he has been persecuted in his field, didn't get tenure and things like that because people thought he's chasing the fairy tales. So it's difficult.
Yeah, archaeology has a reputation of being a really catty industry like that. Like they
Oh, they're
they really
always
don't accept new
no, and
ideas.
they don't like outsiders. And on top of that, you have a lot of archaeologists who just attack
Hmm.
each other. So you get five archaeologists in the room, none of them will agree with each other on anything. It seems like you'll notice that in publications and
Yeah.
in their conferences. Someone will claim an inscription says
Mhm.
this, like especially in biblical archaeology, and they say this is associated with the Bible. I found this inscription, and you'll get 100 other people saying that's not even an inscription. That's a line in the rock, or it's something else.
Yeah.
And so it's tough, but we'll see. So my job right now has just been getting people interested again in the site, bringing in other, whether it's the soil scientist or the geologist. I don't think we're at a point where we do excavations, so you can say archaeology, but we do want to bring in archaeologists to study the pottery, because right near that site, the boat shape, is a huge pottery. I don't say huge, but it's a big pottery deposit. We just want to see what type, whether it's 100 years old or 2,000 years old or whatever.
2,000 years
They
old
can
or
determine
whatever.
that.
Yeah.
So,
They
and no,
that's
that is archaeology because that's
no,
cultural
yeah, no.
remains. So that we can get them involved at that point. So yeah, so there's different things where I'm just trying to get people interested, or doing these podcasts or taking people out there to show them whether
Doing these
they're tourists or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I find this very interesting, and I know I'm not. I know Drew does too, and I know I'm not the only one. I've been talking about this one for a long time, and I really appreciate you coming and making time for us. And if you could just let the people know where they can find you, where they can, if they want to donate, where they can do that as well.
Yeah, so all our information is on our website, noahsarkscans.com. That's plural, noahsarkscans.com. And we have a link to our social media there. We have a tour sign up page, a donation page, a contact page if you're interested in helping. Just today, we had a Turkish person, or yesterday, emailed me. So we're already getting people coming and emailing us, and this person was a preservation specialist in cultural heritage. So, another discipline kind of under archaeology or humanities. And, we're not at the place. Maybe they can help in the plans for preservation of the site because it is exposed to the elements. But yeah, so if someone has
Mhm.
expertise or ideas or just wants to contact us or see the site themselves, there's the contact page, noahsarkscans.com. If you look up we're on Facebook on the same name, but if you look up on YouTube for our videos, it's under Discovered Media. That's my kind of like my YouTube channel, and I make films also on our other trips to Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and so it covers everything, including Noah's Ark. But Discovered Media is on YouTube. So yeah,
Okay. We'll put the links in the description.
sounds
And
good.
then I hope in a little while down the road when you get the other call from us, hope you'll make some time and
Oh,
come
for
back on
sure.
the show and share some
Yeah,
progress.
I will for sure. Yeah, I will keep in
Awesome.
contact, and anything new, if you want to have me back on to talk about it, I'll be ready. So,
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Andrew. And well, we'll see you next
yeah,
time.
thank you. Have a good day.
See you guys.